It's a cold day. I have never in my life experienced minus 14 degrees, which is what the thermometer read at about 6 a.m. And I'm from warmer places and just drove up here from Sedona, Arizona. I want to thank everybody who braved the cold and braved the weather and came here from wherever you came from. Thank you. Stephen, I know it's can be an adventure driving over the mountains from Colorado Springs to get here to Aspen, Colorado. The title of my little segment here is The Crime of the Millennium. The tide is turning. Interesting. So we're actually here dealing with a crime. Something happened that was criminal, that was illegal, that has victims. The victims, you can count them in a lot of different ways. And you can count the, I hate to use the word victim and perpetrator, but are they winners and losers? What are they? There are these wonderful people, a lot of them in New York, Wall Street, taking home multi-million-dollar bonuses and with their yachts and their planes and their amazing homes and so on. And then there are, right now in this negative 14-degree winter storm, people living in tents, in tent cities. People living in the cabs of their pickup trucks in the parking lot of Walmart, taking their kids to school, trying to go to work, trying to pretend nothing happened, trying to make as though life is what it used to be. Something happened. One of the ways of measuring the enormity of what happened is to just look at the number of foreclosures that have occurred in this country in the last, shall we say, 3 years, 4 years, since this thing began. You hear different numbers. The number is at least 3 million homes so far, and is probably more like 4 or 5. And there are at least another 4 or 5 or 6 million homes slated for foreclosure. And if something doesn't change, those homes are going to be lost, and the folks who live in those homes, and the kids who were born in those homes, and the grandmothers who are in their elder years in those homes are going to be out on the street in some way that is not their choice. It's also not their fault, because while an awful lot of people who found themselves unable to pay their mortgage and keep up with things felt really, really bad, and people often just packed up and disappeared in the night because they were ashamed to tell their neighbors even what had happened. It's not your fault. You're not alone. There's millions of us, and I am one of you. I personally have lost, I was relatively wealthy about 3 or 4 years ago. I had 4 properties as a measure of that. I had real estate equity. That real estate equity has disappeared completely. I did not define the value of my property back then. I do not define the value of those properties now, but whatever I thought I had back then has gone away. Somebody made that decision. Wasn't me, possibly the banks, the appraisers and so on. 3 of those 4 properties have so far gone to foreclosure. I'm fighting on the 4th and final property at the moment. Connie and I are the co-owners of those properties. And being filmmakers, what are you going to do when something like this happens? You're going to make a movie. You're going to tell a story. You're going to find the best and most humanly valuable story that you can distill from these experiences. And through the process of foreclosure defense, a term that had never, foreclosure defense, what does that mean? You know, who had to defend themselves against foreclosure even 5 years ago? This is a relatively new phenomenon, and I have to say it's incredibly complex, it's complicated. It's taken me personally an enormous number of hours of research, of reading, of conversing with people, and coming to understand, you know, what happened, why it happened, and what the legal ramifications of this extraordinary phenomenon are. Fact, something happened at Wall Street that enormously enriched the very few. We know who they are. They received this enormous bailout, or this series of enormous bailouts. It's amazing. It's just an extraordinary phenomenon. We could be angry. We could take to the streets. We could, you know, call for violent revolution. That's what has traditionally happened in the past. That's not what we're doing here. The second part of my title is The Tide is Turning. It would seem that decisions are coming down from courts, bankruptcy courts, state courts, Supreme Courts across the country. It would seem that the tide is beginning to turn. At the beginning of all of this, the judges just looked at you. They hadn't the foggiest idea of what you were talking about. They'd never heard of the securitization of residential mortgage loans themselves. MBS was a term they'd never heard. You know, they probably thought it meant more bull something or other, and actually it means mortgage-backed securities. So we're taking the higher ground with this film, and it's tough. Cops and Robbers versus the People, the death and rebirth of the American dream. I think it's pretty easy right now to make a film about the death of the American dream. It's not hard. Go to one of those 10 cities, start interviewing people, talk to people who are devastated at what it means emotionally to be threatened with losing their home. People who haven't slept for months, who simply cannot sleep because they lie awake. It's literally a nightmare. Never mind I don't know how many millions of people who have actually lost their homes. This is not easy. This is not something that people just do. For most of us, it's the biggest investment in our lives. We scraped it together for a very long time to be able to purchase the house in the first place. We then I'm a carpenter builder. I love to vision a property and turn it from whatever it is into something much more beautiful, more valuable. So many people do that. So many people went in and took out refis in order to put it back into the homes. My principle was always, okay, you're going to take $100,000 out of the house, put 50 back in, and restore the equity, and spend the 50 on whatever you like making a movie. That's the kind of thing that we did. So we were fortunate. We actually went for it. We saw what was happening. We said, they must be crazy. I would never lend me this money, but you're lending me this money, that's fine. If this property keeps its value, fine. We basically took our money out. If we lose the properties, we haven't really lost financially. We put a huge amount of money and sweat equity and brilliance into the properties. But we are among the few, I would say, who are free enough, Connie and I, because we're essentially nomadic, we always say. We're at our happiest just about on the road making films. So having a home it's a place to keep your stuff. It's a place where I can stop and settle down and edit. I like that. I need a place from time to time to go and stop. But it's kind of okay to be on the road. And if we lose this last property down in Sedona, Arizona, it means that we have not succeeded in teaching a judge that there's a problem here and having the judge dare to agree. So we could approach this from anger, or we could approach it from healing. And really the point of this film is the rebirth of the American dream. Because whatever the American dream was, I think it got corrupted. I think it was taken to mean everybody can grab as much as they can, and it all became this materialistic thing that's it's just not it, you know? It's not it. So we had a little conversation with Terry yesterday in a coffee shop down in Basalt, Colorado, just down the valley here. And she turned to me and really put me on the spot. She says, okay, you're the guy with the solution. Tell me. The solution. Right. What is the solution? This is a complex, apparently difficult, intractable situation that Alan Greenspan did not understand what was going on when this unfolded. He didn't get it. He didn't know even the guy who was in charge of the Fed. So here we are. We have a problem. Well, what was the problem? A way of looking at it, a metaphor, is that they, whoever they are, the Wall Street guys, came in with this giant multi-hosed vacuum system, like a giant octopus, except it had a lot more than 8 arms. It had one for every home. And basically siphoned out the equity of the middle class of this country. Because I don't know how many people out there in the audience there are who are in danger of losing your homes, but I guarantee that every one of you has lost value in your home or homes. Everybody is underwater. It's just a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class of this country to an extraordinarily small number of individuals who have somehow sequestered that money offshore somewhere in Bermuda or the Cayman Islands or a Swiss bank account. And there it sits. So much money, and I'm not a believer in money. I think money and vapor have a lot in common. But we sort of believe in it. We have this belief that this $20 bill has value. We all buy into that. So all of these $20 bills have been vacuumed off, and there they sit out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean somewhere, and the people are homeless, and they're hungry, and they're jobless. So what do you do? Well, I said, you take that vacuum cleaner and you switch the electrodes. You just turn the electric motor around so it blows the other way. And all of a sudden, all that stuff gets sucked back out of wherever it is and spewed back into the country, and it lands back where it belongs. Now, how do you do that? It's really simple, but it takes ridiculous courage. So is there anybody here who's into ridiculous courage? Courage that is so absurd that your grandmother would smack you and your granddaughter will bless you forever. Okay. What it takes is the cancellation, the extinguishment, the remission of every mortgage in existence. Because it wouldn't be fair to just forgive the mortgages of people who fell behind while someone else is working 7 jobs and still not succeeding. It just wouldn't be fair. The only fair thing is eliminate mortgages completely across the board. No more mortgages. It was an experiment. It had horrific consequences, and the whole securitization and so on, that phenomenon is so complicated we can't get into it tonight. But that whole phenomenon needs to be, it just needs to be stopped. It needs to be prevented. And my proposal is this: cancel, just tear up the mortgages, throw them away, give them back. If anybody lost a home, say you've got your home back. If anybody bought the home, if you bought a foreclosed home, that's a situation. Figure it out. That's not hard. Compared with the other way, if you look at what the government's doing right now, all these congressional hearings and all these crisis panels and so on, none of them are coming up with anything that serves anybody except the banks again, apparently, as far as I can tell. So that's my proposal. Eliminate the mortgages, and then you've restored this country. You've restored the economy, you've restored the middle class, and then you can go to the bank on the corner and say, look, I've got this house, it's worth whatever its then market value is, and you, if you want to, you can take out a mortgage, but do it right this time. There's nothing wrong with the fundamental principle. There's nothing wrong with the fundamental principle of securitization if it's done according to the law. These guys just ran rampant and slipshod over the law. They just ignored. If they had obeyed the law, there actually would, I don't think there would be a problem. The fact is the laws were broken, a crime was committed, the tide is turning, and I'm going to hand this microphone off to somebody, and I have 50-50 choice. Who's it going to be?